Hi everyone! Just a brief note to let you know that we have launched a brand new podcast called Talks at Climind to interview top minds in the field of climate change to discuss on data solutions in climate mitigation, adaptation, and climate finance. Listen to our podcast to hear more from the world's leading experts from academia institute and organizations. From Climind, a team of researchers and entrepreneurs based in Cambridge, Hong Kong, and London, is Talks at Climind, a show about the big ideas about climate change, data science, and innovation. In today's episode, we have Dr.Yixing Xu from Breakthough, an organization created by Bill Gates to accelerate the innovation in energy transition and decarbonization technologies. Yixing has worked at Breakthough for 9 years, and he's now the research director, as well as the chief scientist and the system architect of the Energy System Modeling Project. And he leads a team of brilliant scientists to develop the open source software to simulate the future pathway of energy system. Before Breakthough, he went to Tsinghua University in China and Texas A&M University for his PhD. Imagine how we can simulate and predict how electricity at home works for the future. In today's show, we'll hear from him about how he was initially bought by Gates and the stories about the software behind, which has been widely adopted by organizations and then research institutions globally. Users may create very realistic simulations about how the power system runs today and in the future using the software his team has built. Listen to our episode to speak with the mind behind Breakthough Energy.
So first, thank you very much, Karen. It's my honor to be here to share my work and experience in clean energy transition field. And I'm sure that this is a great platform. It can help me reach a lot of people, professionals in these areas. I'm very glad to be here. Thank you. And what brings me to this company or this field is that so I started this project roughly 9 years ago. At that time, there was almost no movement on clean energy transition at all. But there are a few figures in the world. They are already thinking about that. One of them was Bill Gates himself. And also another one is Nathan Myhrvold. So Nathan was the former CTO of Microsoft. And then he started his own company called Intellectual Ventures and focusing on innovation. So he and so Bill Gates and Nathan Myhrvold, they got together and they find out that we have to face climate change sooner or later. But at that time, 9 years ago, there was very little renewable energy in United States electric power system, and there was also almost no credible energy system model to help people even understand what's the challenge then and what's the challenge 10 years later or 20 years later. So basically, people were just very worried or concerned about what's going to happen in the future, but there was no analytical tool for anyone to draw any quantitative conclusion or started in a more rigorous way. At that time, it was really just a qualitative arguments. So that's how my project was started 9 years ago, and that's how I was brought into this project by Bill Gates and Nathan Myhrvold, and I was really honored to start this project then. And now we are a team of sometimes 10 to 15 people working on this project, and I'm very proud that we can open source almost everything, so that people in the field, either you're engineer, scientist, or policymakers, they can all use our models and the studies and publish the reports or papers to help them make better decisions.
Thank you so much, Yixing. 10 people doesn't sound a really sizable team, but we'll come back to this question later about the team at the Breakthough. So perhaps we can start from a 30 minutes presentation, and then we'll open the floor to our audience joining us. And you have the floor. Thank you so much.
Sounds good. Okay, let me start sharing my slides, and please let me know if it's working properly. All right, can you see the full screen of the slide?
Yeah, it's perfect.
Awesome. Okay, so today my topic is tackling climate challenging through energy system modeling. So basically, this is my work. And before I dive into the details, I want to briefly talk about how Breakthrough Energy kind of a thought about how we tackle climate change. And this can be seen from how we structure the company. So within Breakthrough Energy, there are several different departments, and every department or teams are actually working on very different things, although they are all related to climate change or energy transition. So one of them is working on venture capital. So they are investing in startup companies, and they are focusing on very large impact, new technology, and risky startup companies. They want to make sure that the money they put in can have a big impact if they become successful. And there are also teams working on policy. So we all know that policy is very important. And the United States, we had the Inflation Reduction Act last year, which is the largest one in the U.S. history. And the policy team basically helps people help people in Washington, D.C. to develop better policy to support clean energy transition, and also help industry people to understand this policy better, to help them take advantage of these policies to actually make the energy transition happen. We also have team working on funding projects. For example, the Breakthrough Energy Catalyst program is about funding project instead of funding companies. Right? They raise money from public sector, private sector, and then make sure that they use this money to support innovative technology, which is the lack of money or is too risky for other people to invest. We also have a program called Breakthrough Energy Fellows. This is more about identifying new technologies in national labs, in universities, to support PhD students, postdocs, and also pair them with kind of industry veterans to help them basically build up a small company around these new technologies and may help them de-risk the technologies. And maybe one day some of the technology will become mature and they become their own startups. So this is more about making sure that there is sufficient money to support the new technologies, which are very innovative but also risky, and right now they need a lot of money. And my team focus on energy system modeling. So we use data, we do a lot of research, and we try to model the clean energy transition to basically support all the teams, and also support the industry, support policy makers outside of Breakthrough Energy. So that's how we think of how to tackle climate change. So we have people working in investment, in policy, in research, in modeling. All right, now I'm going to dive into the details. So we all know that every year we emit about 51 billion tons of greenhouse gases. So this is a huge problem. Reducing them is not enough. We really need to get them to zero or even negative. Otherwise, the temperature will continue to rise and climate change cannot be stopped. So this is a huge challenge. So how do we solve this problem? So we first have to understand the problem really well. And this is also modeling can help. And we also need to develop solutions. And before we implement a solution, we need to validate these solutions. So again, models, data are very important in this process. In the end, we need to work together. It's really not just the scientists, engineers. We also need entrepreneurs. We also need policymakers, investors, everyone in the whole world to work together to make it happen. So this is a huge challenge, and we need to put in a lot of effort from everywhere, from all teams, in order to make it happen. And every country have different emissions, and in the whole world, we have kind of these 5 large categories of emissions. And these emissions, we call them the 5 grand challenges. So basically, emissions happens from different industries, different sectors, and we want to understand the problem in order to solve the problem. So we want to dive deep into each industry or sector to see exactly where those emissions come from and what can we do with it. So the largest one is the manufacturing. As for this sector, the most challenging one is how to handle cement and how to handle steel. So this is a huge challenge, and we do not have mature solutions. And hopefully in the next 10 years, a lot of research can be done, and we can start doing something interesting and impactful starting from 2030. So the next 10 years is going to be very important in research and development, and the next 10 years is going to be very important to implement the new technologies to tackle the emissions in manufacturing sector. The second one is the electricity sector. So renewable energy is going to play a major role, and luckily we already have very mature wind and solar technologies, and the energy storage is developing very fast, and the technology and the cost is also going to the right direction. So now is the time for us to scale up the mature technologies, especially in electricity sector. Agriculture is also very important. So we have to find ways to handle, how to deal with a large amount of emissions from cows, and how to control the greenhouse gas emissions from fertilizers. So these are very challenging problems too. In transportation, again, luckily we have electric vehicles, which are relatively mature now. Even they are still more expensive than gasoline cars, but the price are very close. So we have a great opportunity in scaling up electric vehicles in the next 10 years really fast. So that's going to revolutionize transportation sector. The last one is building. So in the United States and in Europe and in many regions, space heating consume a lot of energy and also emit a lot of emissions. So how can we electrify the building sectors is another challenge. And once we electrify building sector and transportation sector, we have to face another problem. So which is our electric grid may not be able to handle the added new electricity demand. Then how we utilize the flexibility within building sector and transportation sector to make them work or coordinate the demand with our generations from renewable energy. That's another challenge I'm going to get into later. So long story short, so we are going to electrify almost everything as much as we can and as fast as we can. So looking at this trend, we are expecting in the future the electricity demand to double or even triple. And this is a huge challenge. And a lot of research institutes and groups have been studying the energy transition in the next 50 years. So here is one of the study about the United States, like what we need to do in order to achieve net zero by 2050 in the United States. And this is quite representative. I believe in Europe, we are facing this kind of a similar story here. So we really need to significantly scale up wind and solar. And we also need to think about other technology like nuclear. Especially small modular nuclear. Like how can we use small modular reactor? How can we use these new technologies? And also battery is going to play a major role in the future. And we also know that the future is actually uncertain. So besides just studying one potential pathways to net zero by 2050 or 2060, we really need to look at all types of options. This is another study done by Princeton University. They are looking at the different potential pathways based on different assumptions. So we may have a future with a lot of wind and solar or intermittent renewable energies, or we may not have a lot of wind and solar, but we have a lot of nuclear. And these are just a few potential scenarios here. And we know that it really depends on what's going to happen, or whether we have what type of technology breakthrough we are going to have in the next 1 or 2 decades. Then that's going to dictate which pathway we will be on in the next 30 years or 40 years in order to achieve net zero. So in my team or in Breakthrough Energy, what we're trying to do here is that we're trying to build an open source model, and this model can help us quantitatively study what's going to happen in the future, what are the potential scenarios or pathways, and we can quickly adjust this model to reflect the reality. For example, the Inflation Reduction Act, that's going to significantly reduce the cost for wind, solar, energy storage, electric vehicles. So we can take these assumptions or these new changes into our model to study what might happen in the next 5 to 10 years or even 20 to 30 years. And the reason we chose to go open source is because we know that it's very important to make the studies and model and data transparent, so that more people can be part of this study or can use this model and data to do analysis themselves. And this is really important because we need more people to be on the same page, especially on the policy side. No matter where you go, people may argue what's the best policy, and it's very hard to bring everyone on the same page. So by making it open source, by making it very transparent, people can really argue in a more meaningful way because they're looking at the same data set, they're looking at the very transparent process, they can argue about the assumptions, and that conversation will be much more meaningful. And also it produces people a very low-cost way and a very convenient way to study what's going to happen. And they can make their own judgment, they can make their investment based on their studies, or make better policies. I'm going to show a few examples like how we use this model to help us better understand what's going to happen in the next 10 years or by 2030, like what we need to do in the United States to achieve a high percentage of clean energy, especially in electricity sector. So United States, if we don't do anything, if it's just business as usual, by 2030, we won't see a lot of a CO2 emission reduction. Maybe it's less than 10%. The reason is that the goal is not ambitious. So the good thing that last year we finally have a very major policy, which is the Inflation Reduction Act, that's going to inject a lot of money, several $100 billion of money into electricity sector and other sectors. So that's going to significantly lower the cost for developers, etc., so that we can really build a lot of wind and solar and energy storage and also transmission lines, basically to strengthen our electric grid so that it can support the clean energy transition. So with this more ambitious goal, we can truly reduce the CO2 emission by 50%, starting from today till 2030. So that's roughly close to, that's a lot of reduction in emissions, and that's going to be very meaningful. But that also means we may need to build a lot more wind and solar and a lot of infrastructures. And that's going to cost a lot of money. So we want to study this ambitious goal in a more quantitative way rather than a qualitative way. So potentially there are many pathways to achieve 50% CO2 emission reduction or 40% CO2 emission reduction. So what we want to do here is that we want to look at the one potential pathways, which is basically looking at how to scale up our mature technologies really fast. These mature technologies include wind, solar, and transmission expansion, including HVDC and HVAC. So here we are focusing on the United States. We're trying to say in order to get to a high percentage of clean energy electricity system by 2030, what can we do? And this pathway we studied is called a macrogrid pathway. So basically, we look at the United States, we build a model, electricity model for the United States, and we're trying to see where to build those high voltage direct current transmission lines in the system to help deliver a large amount of clean energy from the clean energy rich resources to the demand centers, mainly along the western coast, eastern coast, and also Texas. So here we look at four potential different designs. So design one is about upgrading AC transmission. Design 2A, 2B, and 3, they are about upgrading HVDC converters and also long distance HVDC transmission lines. So the main idea is that can we build something similar to interstate highways so we can make sure that the renewable energy is delivered to the demand centers effectively and efficiently. And of course, this is a major infrastructure build out, and it costs a lot of money. So the total cost could be $1.5 trillion. That includes transmission line expansions and also wind and solar expansions. That's a lot of money. However, if we look at the benefits, it is definitely worth doing that. So here is the generation portfolio of today's electric system and the 2030s electric system. So as you can see, the green and the yellow represent wind and solar. So in the next 10 years, or actually next 8 years, we're going to see a lot more wind and solar deployment in the United States. And this is a very quantitative study. So people can use this and study very detailed what's going to happen in their own state or in their own city. And the benefit is obvious. So we can significantly reduce CO2 emission reduction and also significantly reduce the dependencies on fossil fuels. So this is also good for energy security. And looking at the cost and the benefit, it's obvious that it's not going to add a lot of cost to the overall system. because when you add more wind and solar, even you have to put in a lot of initial investment costs, but the operating cost is much lower than natural gas power plants and coal power plants. So this is a good investment, and this it's worth it. The economic is very good. So here is the example showing one of the design, which is a HVDC network overlay on top of the today's United States electric grid. So as you can see, as sun rises in the east, the yellow circles representing the solar power are lighting up. And also in the middle of the United States, the green circles representing the wind power is also lighting up. It's showing that the solar and the wind are generating electricity. And the long distance transmission lines in blue color and also the arrow there on them shows the directions and the amount of energy is transferred within United States. So today, United States, it's actually not one electric grid. It's actually three relatively independent electric grid. It's Western, it's Eastern, and it's Texas. And in this design, our proposal is to think about a way to use HVDC to connect all three interconnections together, kind of like a nationwide highway system, to make sure that the renewable energy across the United States can be transferred to anywhere efficiently in a very cost-effective way. So as you can see in the afternoon, the solar power in California is actually delivered from Western to Eastern United States. And in the evening or in the early mornings, the wind power in Eastern United States is actually delivered to Western interconnection. So this is what we want to see, effectively using renewable energy to support the demand across the whole United States. And this is very effective. All right, so this is another angle. So we know that the wind and solar are already mature, but we also know that the energy storage is going to play a major role in the future. So in this study, what we're looking at is in order to achieve a deeper decarbonization, how much wind and solar and energy storage we need to build in. And also the electric grid itself also needs to be reinforced to make sure that the system can support all these new added generations and equipment like energy storage. So this one shows that if we want to reduce CO2 emission by 40%, which is kind of limiting the CO2 emission to 60% of today's emission, like how much wind and solar we need to build. The green circle represent wind and the yellow circle represent solar. This is in Texas. Right, so the next one shows if we want to further decarbonize the grid and how much more wind and solar we need to have. As you can see in this scenario, we are seeing a lot more energy storages installed in the system, which means maybe the first 40% CO2 emission reduction will mainly depend on wind and solar. But if we want to continue decarbonize the grid, we need to install a lot more energy storage. All right, if this is a scenario with 80% CO2 emission reduction, and we see a lot more energy storage are installed into the system. And another constraint we need to be aware of is that not in every country you can build as many transmission lines as you want. Especially in the United States and in Europe, building long distance transmission lines is very, very challenging. And this is very different from China. So which means when we are thinking about clean energy transition, not only we need to think about technologies or the cost of technologies, we also need to think about the policies. So if the policy in the United States and Europe is not in favor of building more transmission lines, then we have to think about, with the limitation on the transmission build out, what other technologies needs to be increased in order to support our goal. So this is the so-called trade-off between different types of technologies or the competition between different clean energy technologies. So transmission lines and energy storage has this trade-off relationship, which means if we cannot build a lot of transmission lines, we have to build a lot more energy storage so that the clean energy can be stored and then can be stored when they are in surplus and can be released to support the demand when there's not enough energy, renewable energy. All right, so as we can see, when we have a limit or constraints on transmission build out, we actually have to build a lot more energy storage. And this is my main point I want to make. different technologies, they are the mix of different technologies are very important, and we need to look at the policies, the technology in different regions, locations, to find out exactly what is the optimal mix of different technologies or infrastructure build out. And another challenge in future energy system or during this energy transition is renewable energy curtailment. So the figure on the left hand shows today's electric system, and the figure on the right hand shows the 2030 electric power systems generation. As you can see, in today's system, we have some wind and some solar in the United States, but majority of the energy is from natural gas, and there's a lot from coal generation. So in 2030, we're going to have a lot more wind and solar. Again, wind is green and solar is yellow. But at the same time, we have to face a lot of curtailment. And this curtailment normally happens when the renewable energy is generating, but the demand is really not there, especially in the fall season and the spring season. You can see there are a lot more curtailment happening there. At the same time, we really need to build out our transmission system. Otherwise, the congestions on the transmission system can cause curtailment too. And curtailment means waste of resources, waste of money. It means the cost for the society in getting clean energy is higher. So handling curtailment is a huge challenge, and energy storage is helping us to reduce curtailment. All right. So another study we can do using this type of open source model we build is to study extreme weather events. As you all know, the climate change is happening. The temperature is rising, and more frequent extreme weather events is happening everywhere. So United States in 2021, one major thing happened in Texas is the extreme cold weather events. And during that extreme cold event, rolling blackouts happened in Texas, and it caused a huge amount of damage to Texas. So by using this type of open source model, we can really help everyone in the society to transparently understand what exactly happened in Texas. And this can help us understand or come up with potential solutions to prevent similar things from happening. And this is exactly what we did. So we use this open source model to reproduce exactly what happened in Texas in our computer. And then we proposed 4 different potential solutions. And actually some of them are already in implementation. For example, deploying more energy storage strategically across the system, or considering building transmission lines to connect Texas with eastern and western interconnections in the United States, and also weatherization or winterization of the thermal generators or renewable energy generators in Texas. So that can help those equipments to get through the extreme cold or hot weather events, which are for sure going to happen more frequently. And another major thing is demand response. So demand response can really help the system a lot to get through extreme weather events without adding a lot of cost in building out new equipments. And the good thing about using this type of quantitative model is that you can get quantitative results, and that's super important for policymakers, and for people to budget exactly the amount of money to invest in building out new infrastructures. And this is directly comparing the cost with the benefits, and it can help people make better decisions. All right, so that's about our modeling work, and I want to kind of step back a little bit to talk about how we think about the whole climate change challenge and how to solve them. So one key concept Bill Gates proposed is that the green premium. So the green premium is basically, in order to do the same thing, the clean solution is normally more expensive than the dirty solution, and the amount of surplus or the difference is the green premium. And this is the thing we look very closely, because if we can get the green premium to a very small number, or even to 0, or even to negative, that means the clean technology can directly competing with dirty technologies. And that means this technology is ready for large-scale deployment, and we should focus on the scaling up of those technologies. So this is directly affecting how people make decisions, especially policy decisions, and also investment decision. Here on this figure, I show three premiums. So if you can see that in electric vehicle and clean electricity, the green premium is pretty small. It's about 10%. So that gives this technology a chance to compete with old technologies, and they are ready to be scaled up very quickly. However, for cement, it's a different story. The green premium is very, very high, and we need a lot of cement. We need a lot of concrete. So this is where the VCs are investing money in. They are trying to do a lot of R&D to make sure that we can find a good solution to significantly reduce the green premium. And hopefully right now the green premium is almost more than 200%. If we can get down those premium to a small number, then the clean cement has a chance to compete. And in order to fight climate change, we really need to do more than just the research and development. We also need to make sure that the policy is ready, the government is involved, and also another important thing is the market. We need entrepreneurs, we need a market to buy those clean technologies. And there are a lot of activities within Breakthrough Energy are actually trying to solve those problems. So one of them, as I mentioned, is Breakthrough Energy Ventures. They are picking out potentially impactful startups, inventing new technologies, and invest a lot of money in these companies to help them grow. And a lot of technologies are going to fail for sure. However, if some of them become successful, it's going to have a huge impact. And another program is the Catalyst. So this program is more about identifying projects. As you know, investing in startups may cost you tens of millions of dollars, but you want to build a functional factory. The cost could be more than the equity cost of a startup company. So this is why the Catalyst program is trying to raise a lot of money to help companies, especially startups with new technologies, to help them actually demonstrate their technology through building out factories and actually produce products and equipment in large scale to test out whether it's working. And also this type of scaling up is going to help reduce the cost of the new technologies. And also in this program, we're also trying to find the buyers, off-takers of these new technologies. And currently we are focusing on sustainable aviation fuel. And this is something new, just happened last year. And what we're trying to do is to make sure that the new technology can have sufficient money to build the real factory, and their product can be purchased by airlines, etc., to make sure there is the market. Right. Another major technology we're focusing on is, of course, hydrogen. So hydrogen has a huge potential. One of the benefits of hydrogen is that it can interact with electric power system. Hydrogen can be used as energy storage media, and this can really help handle the large scale of intermittent renewable energy generation. And in order to develop hydrogen, it's really not just the electrolyzer to generate hydrogen, but the whole supply chain. And once we have hydrogen, we also can use hydrogen and combine with other chemical materials to produce valuable chemicals such as methane and methanol. And this is a whole chemical industry's future. Hydrogen can be also used in transportation, and again, along this supply chain, every step needs a lot of innovations in order to produce hydrogen efficiently, and then all the way delivered to maybe heavy-duty vehicles using hydrogen. Policy is also a very important thing we're looking at. So we have published 2 policy-related documents online, so feel free to download them. So for governments, they need to understand what type of policies they need to have in order to support the industry, to support the clean energy transition. And as corporate, they also need to understand as a company what they can do in order to support this clean energy transition, and also take advantage of the policies government put out. Right. This is going to be the end of my presentation. This is my email, and feel free to contact me if you have any questions. I'm very glad to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Yixing. This is like a really wonderful introduction to get a glance of the Breakthrough Energy's work. So the following session will be hosted by me and then Andy, who is on the call. So Andy is a PhD from Cambridge, studying the environment policy. I'll let him to introduce himself later. And I also have our audience joined. Feel free to raise your hand. So in the last 10 minutes, we're going to open the floor to the audience as well. So quickly, just to bring me back to energy classes, your introduction. So my first kind of question, guess a lot of audience will be interested, is about what is renewable energy or clean energy when we're talking about it. Like, do you have a taxonomy at the Breakthrough? So something I wanted to ask especially is about nuclear, which
Yeah,
is a little
absolutely.
controversial.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think in most of countries, people all recognize wind and solar as clean energy and renewable energy. But in other energy forms, different regions kind of have different definition. I think one controversial thing is about nuclear, another one is about natural gas. So in our mind, we don't think natural gas is a clean energy. So even though the CO2 emission from natural gas is much lower comparing to coal, but still it's a lot of CO2 emissions. On the other hand, another thing maybe different from Europe is that the United States, we do consider nuclear as a form of clean energy. So it does not emit the CO2s when it is operated. And we see a lot of potential that we can make nuclear very safe. There are a lot of new activities going on. I think one of them, which is a very highlighted last year, is fusion, nuclear fusion. So I think maybe more than $20 billion went into nuclear fusion in the past few years. That's a huge amount of money. Of course, we cannot just only bet on fusion, just one technology. If it happens, if it becomes successful, that's going to be a huge success for clean energy transition. But we have to be prepared. What if nuclear fusion didn't work? So that's why we also invest in other the other type of next generation of nuclear. That includes making them smaller, making them safer, and also make them more flexible. So this is one of the biggest companies is doing. It's called TerraPower. So they are basically building this safer, more flexible nuclear.
Thank you. I watched the documentary about the company just mentioned. I think there's a collaboration in China as well. So for the audience interested, there's a documentary on Netflix. It's called Inside Gatespring. I remember the name is. Yeah. So just to carry on your answer there. So we talked a lot about the modeling part. The question about data. So I'm curious, where's the data we're talking about? Where's it coming from? And then are they supposed to be public, especially when we're talking about transportation or building on the building sector specifically? Like now, from our study at Imperial College London, we find it's extremely difficult to find the household level energy consumption. Like those data belong to great company or the private sectors who is not really willing to share. So just to ask a data question about the access issue here.
Yeah, you're right. I think we are facing the same problem here. I think at the same time, we are also lucky. I think in the United States and in Europe, we can already access a lot of aggregated data. As you said, maybe not the household level, but maybe city level or zip code level data we can have access. I think in my work, we are facing the same challenge. Basically, all the data we use in our work are publicly available. But because privacy issues, etc., the data we use are not down to the household level, but it could be down to like zip code or city or county or state level. And based on this data, we do a lot of modeling to kind of disaggregate this aggregated data set. So it can be very helpful for us to understand the large scale trend or regional trend about transportation or building sectors and electricity sectors. So I think when we don't have enough data, we have to be really smart in using modeling techniques to disaggregate or decompose those data for our own purposes. For example, we have been doing building and transportation electrification studies in the last 2 years, and we're going to publish our work next month. So that's going to show high resolution transportation and building electrification data in the United States. Still, we are not down to household level, but we can get down to the city level and sometimes even like zip code level. And this could be very helpful for people who are starting kind of a large-scale energy system. And I think that's the first step. And then we need more detailed data to study the distribution system, which right now we don't have much good data there.
Well, that sounds a really daunting project. So I follow up on two questions, and then I'll hand it to Andy. So the next one about which part you think is the biggest challenge, like in the entire pipeline, from data availability to processing the data, and then building the model, and then to like building analysis on top of it.
That's a great question. I have to say almost every part is a challenging part. I think when it comes to data collection, high quality data, and whether the data is publicly available, whether we can publish the data or we can only use the data to do some studies but cannot share with anyone. So the data part is challenging, but I would say the modeling part is also challenging too, because we are facing a very large system. The United States, right now in our United States model, we have 82,000 nodes and more than 100,000 branches representing the whole system, with more than 10,000 generators. So in order to compute how the system works on an hourly basis for a whole year or for several years in any future scenarios, that's a lot of a computational time. So even modeling itself is challenging, and also computation is challenging. So I would say, basically every part of the modeling is a challenging work. But that also means there are a lot of opportunities for new technologies to come in to solve the problems. For example, one thing is AI. So when you don't have enough good data, whether you can use limited data and use AI to help you generate a good enough or representative data set for your own study, and whether you can use AI to speed up your computation time so you can quickly get to your solutions, which means you can explore many scenarios in the future and help you find the optimal scenarios or optimal pathways.
Yeah, if I'm correct, isn't that synthetic data? Like trying to.
Exactly. So right now, the data we are using, some of them are real data. Those real data are already publicly available. And when we need to use data which are not publicly available, we use synthetic data, which is statistically similar to real data, but not revealing any confidential information of the real data.
That sounds a really practical solution. So my last question based on this, I just came back from Sharm el-Sheikh, the COP27. A term I continue being hearing is about energy poverty. So currently in Europe we're facing this energy crisis, really scary bills every month. But in countries like in Southeast Asia, a lot of countries are facing slightly different thing, like their lack of enough or like accessibility to energy. So my question is, would the modeling be different approach in countries like Indonesia or some other countries, Africa, compared with like US? Can this method be scaled or replicated?
I think so. I think in every region, every country, we are facing different challenges. So I previously mentioned that United States and Europe, one challenge we are facing is that we cannot build a lot of transmission lines. So even though we know how to do it, but the policy-wise, or people are really against the building transmission lines. In the United States, we call that NIMBY mindset. So not in my backyard. So a lot of people in the United States, they want clean energy, but they don't want the transmission lines near their home to deliver clean energy to them. So that's a dilemma we are facing. So I think in different countries we are facing different challenges. So in Southeast Asia or Africa, definitely I think it's a totally different set of challenges. They are going to experience very high electricity demand growth, but right now they don't have a good infrastructure to start from. So maybe for those countries, they have an opportunity to leapfrog their infrastructure development. For example, I think in certain regions, maybe it makes sense to directly go into a microgrid or distributed energy resources like rooftop solar and home energy storage. Maybe that's the pathway for them too. But I think one important thing for us to know is that I think countries like United States, China, and regions like Europe, these three main regions are the three largest emitters in the world. And I think these regions also need to assume the responsibility of developing these technologies and mature them, bring down the cost, and then help other countries to use these already mature, already low-cost technologies. I think right now solar is definitely there, and hopefully very soon energy storage or other technologies will be there too for other developing countries.
100%. The pathway of solar is like a miracle, like how government subsidy has grown this industry as a whole. I'll pass it on to Andy. Andy, maybe you can start from a little bit introduction and then link to questions.
Okay, thank you, Karen, and also thank you so much, Dr. Yixing. It's a super insightful and fantastic sharing. I totally agree the importance of the modeling in the maybe solving the climate change problem. I'm Tsinghua. Now I'm the PhD student at University of Cambridge. Before moving to Cambridge, I studied in Hong Kong University of Science Technology. So there I work with a group of the professors whose expertise in environment policy. And now I also working as the research assistant with the UK-based think tank called the Climate Crisis Advisory Group. It's led by the former chief scientist for UK government. He's the expert in climate change, and also with the Alice Hill. I'm not sure if you heard about him. He's also the former, I think, the policy assistant for Barack Obama on the climate change issue. So we just finished the NDC assessment between US and China. So based on the assessment, I think I have questions. Because when I look at the policy system in UK and maybe US and China, I find maybe, for example, China is the central system. So we just design the top level policy and then force the implementation. But in US system, actually, we can find a huge endogenous diversity among different states. Absolutely. Especially if we look at the energy structures of the different states, we also can find a lot of differences. For example, as you showed in your sharing, the Texas, and if we compare Texas and California or even the New York state, we can find a lot of differences. So when we analyze it, or when we do the modeling of energy system or modeling analysis, what kind of region level should be focused on? For example, the state level, or we can do some federal level analysis?
That's a great question. You're absolutely correct. I think United States is quite unique in this way. So it's basically a very fragmented electric system, United States. So Texas is an independent electric grid, and California is inside of a Western interconnection. And California, it's a deregulated power market. But in other parts of Western interconnection, it's not deregulated. It's basically a utility, vertical utility controlling all the way from generation, transmission to distribution. So it's quite fragmented. And I think you're right. I think if you really want to study specific policies, United States, and you really want to implement a policy, it's very important to study, to pick out, to focus on the exact region you want to have an impact. So our work is a little bit different. So we are trying to see what's the long-term trend, what's the major problems or major challenges or the major solutions to those challenges in the next several decades in the United States. So what we are doing is that we look at the whole United States electric grid system. But we are also aware that once we know the direction we're chasing, then we need to get down to the regional level, like state level, or even like utility level, to truly understand exactly what's going on there. Because United States, the policies could be very different in different regions. So if you are going to study the policies in the United States, I think maybe one way to go is to look at the so-called balancing authority level. So within one balancing authority, there could be several utilities. There could be several states or several cities, but normally they are sharing the same set of policies. And also you can separate them to look at the deregulated power markets like California, Texas, and New York, and not yet, but still regulated vertical utilities in other regions of the United States. They could be very different.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And another question is about the HVDC, because in your slides, you mentioned a lot of things about HVDC, because in China, I think they also developing a lot of HVDC, or they call it the UHVDC, especially for the West-East transmission, electricity transmission project. So, but when they develop the HVDC, I think there's a problem, because as we know, when we develop some renewable energy, especially the wind energy and the solar energy, sometimes they will be the distributive instead of the central and maybe a huge project. But when we do the HVDC, that means we should integrate a lot of electricity, or integrate a lot of maybe power production, and then transmit to a next step or next station. So how to deal with the look like the kind of contradictory between the distributive renewable energy system and also the HVDC?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think in the United States, sometimes we have this argument too, like whether we should go central or go distributed. And sometimes people on the same side, like fighting climate change, increased clean energy penetrations, they fight with each other about this notion of central versus distributed. Now, our opinion is that we definitely need both of them. There's no doubt. Long term, we need both of them, because just to think about, remember that like at least we need to double or triple the electricity demand. So I don't think depending on distributed generation resources is sufficient. I don't think that will be the case. So I definitely think that central plus distributed, they need to work together. But sometimes people are arguing with each other. One very famous example is that I think 1 or 2 years ago, there is a long distance transmission lines going from Canada to the United States. And the people in the United States are very, very against this project. And they believe that although that transmission line is delivering clean energy from Canada to the United States, they do not need that transmission line because they can depend on distributed energy resources. I cannot agree with that argument. We really need both of them. We really need both the long distance transmission lines delivering the centralized, the large power plants of solar and wind, and also the distributed ones. Because long term, in order to satisfy or meet the 2 times or 3 times demand in the future, we need both of them. So I think in China, I think the reason it makes sense to go central, maybe faster than distributed, is because the cost. So right now, for example, use solar as example, the solar power, the centralized solar power is much cheaper than distributed ones. I think the distributed ones is almost double the price of the centralized solar power. So as you can see, if we only rely on distributed energy resources like rooftop solar power, the cost is going to be very high. So if we can effectively use utility scale solar and build the long distance transmission line, the added cost to the system or eventually to the customers is going to be much lower than just the rooftop solar power. Another thing we need to remember is that the United States it already becomes very apparent that the high-income families can afford distributed solar power, but low-income families, they cannot. So this is another thing we need to be very careful, which is the so-called energy equity. So we want to make sure that no one is left behind, especially when it comes to new technologies. So this is why I think we really need both of them, because distributed energy resources can increase reliability of the distribution systems. It can also lower the energy costs in certain regions. But we truly need more efficient, much cheaper, centralized solar and wind powers to support a big portion of the future energy demand.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's super insightful. And maybe the last question is about the curtailment, because when you mentioned the curtailment, because I also have a research before on the wind curtailment in China. So, in your opinion, what's the mechanism or what's the main reasons for curtailment, especially for renewable energy curtailment?
I think, yeah, this is a great discussion I would like to discuss with you. So United States, for example, again, use Texas as an example. Texas experienced a lot wind curtailment, mainly because the demand and the generation are not matching in terms of time. So wind is generating a lot during night, but the energy demand is pretty high during daytime. Another problem is in Texas, the wind is in the northwest region, but the major demand center are in the eastern region. So there are not enough transmission lines to deliver wind power to the demand center. So I think right now, mainly these are the two limiting factors to have a higher percentage of wind power in Texas. And I think it's going to continue and getting worse, United States, the curtailment thing. Right now, we don't see a lot of curtailment simply because the United States electric grid has built in certain reserve in the past decades, but now we are rapidly using up those reserves. So the system is getting to a point that if we don't build sufficient transmission lines or add in new energy storage, we're going to see a lot more curtailment from wind and solar. This is already showing that for new wind and solar project, their integration cost is rapidly increasing comparing to the past few years. That is because the reserve built into the system is very close to be used up, and people just have to build much more transmission capacity to make sure that those wind and solar actually can be delivered to the system.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so I will pass to Karen.
Thanks. So I will bring it back to slightly like non-technical questions. We talk about building like lots of site on both supply, demand, the transition. So my question about finance, and as like US just launches new Deficit Reduction Act. So how the new inflation like plan, the Deficit Reduction Act has impacting Breakthrough Energy's work as a general, and the more I guess it's climate is really a discussion about cost and benefit a lot of times. So like the research at Breakthrough Energy, has it been any impact on the investor side? Like the research result shows, have you been successfully persuade someone say this can be a really good deal to invest in? So just want to pick your brain on the cost benefit, the finance side thing.
Yeah, definitely. I think what you meant to see is the Inflation Reduction Act, United States.
Yeah.
So I think that's the biggest policy to support climate change in U.S. history. That's definitely going to significantly reduce the cost of wind, solar energy storage, electric vehicles, energy efficiencies, and hydrogens in the future. The amount of money is so big. I think right now Europe is trying to come up with competitive policies to support clean energy transition in Europe too. Otherwise, maybe a lot of companies, they only want to build factories in the United States, and that's not what Europe wants to see. So I think this is going to change investment and finance quite a lot. This act is a major act. It basically brings down the cost of almost every clean energy technologies in the next 10 years, guaranteed. That's going to bring in a lot of certainty to finance, and it's going to make a lot of projects which are not considered profitable now. As far as I know, in recent years, I would see that the energy storage project in the United States, including Texas and in California, is going to explode. For sure, because energy storage was not cost effective before, but now with this new act, it is going to be much more profitable in the future. And also another trend we have to be aware of is that the extreme weather events. So climate change is already happening. And in 2021, the data shows that some energy storage investment, they can recoup majority of their investment just during those extreme, like maybe 1 or 2 weeks extreme weather events, because during those events, the electricity price is going to be extremely high. So that's good. That it basically means that not only you can build your energy storage much cheaper in the future, but also you can support those extreme weather events with your energy storage project, and you can recoup your investment very fast. So that's why I'm thinking the next few years, energy storage is going to be basically battery is going to be a huge thing in United States for sure. So that's going to change the finance of those projects and even how the system is operating. But again, I think one bottleneck in United States is transmission system. And this is not a problem solved yet. With more wind, solar energy storage connected to a system, people will see that this is a major challenge, and people will be forced to react to it.
Well, I would say that.
Okay, I remember your second question. So how the research can help with the investment? Maybe use our macrogrid study as example. Basically, our study shows that United States, in order to achieve 70% clean energy, the clean energy includes wind, solar, nuclear, and hydro. In order to get from currently like 40 something percent all the way to 70% by 2030, we really need to build a lot of transmission lines. That's about 30% to 40% transmission line expansion in the United States in the next 8 years. So that's about 3% per year of a transmission expansion. But now the United States, the transmission expansion rate is less than 1%. So that's basically our research basically shows to the investors that there is going to be a huge need for transmission. If you build it, you are going to make the system much better. There will be a high demand for transmission. So I would say those type of this is how our research is affecting the investment. And in Breakthough Energy, we actually invested several transmission technology companies. One of them is focusing on low temperature superconductor. Another one is looking at the new materials, basically to replace the current transmission lines without a huge kind of a reconstruction of the transmission towers. Basically, if you replace the old lines with the new lines, you can double or triple your transmission capacity right away. So that's the way to go. So by pointing out the demand, pointing out the future trend, it can help investors to identify companies who has the potential technology to solve those challenges, which are going to be in high demand in the next 10 years.
Well, I would say that's what makes the simulation really meaningful part of the work to actually calculate before we execute and put lots of investment into things we cannot predict. So I will introduce a guest today. So we have Professor Meng Jing. She is a really award-winning researcher from UCL, and then recently been nominated as under 35 by the MIT Review. So she has research related to this field as well. I will pass on to Professor Meng and to have her questions.
Thank you, Karen and Dr. Xu. My research has done lots of construction of emission inventory and also the climate solution for emerging economies. And thank you for your introduction to your energy system model. I can say it's very powerful. But for emerging economies, it's impossible to have the similar level of data availability. So I'm wondering if your energy system model can be adjusted to the emerging economies, or if not, how we can design decarbonization pathway for emerging economies.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Dr. Meng. I think this is a very important topic. We actually modeled not just the United States, but also Europe. And maybe in the future, people can use our model to model other countries and regions, including like Africa and South America, etc. So our model could be easily adjusted to model other countries. It's basically data plus the software in our model. So the data part is really the challenging part. But as far as I know, that some researchers in Europe, they actually modeled Africa using very limited data access. Sometimes they use AI technologies by looking at the satellite image to basically figure out where are the transmission lines, where are the distribution lines, and use those limited information to build a kind of a backbone model of the energy system in certain countries. So I think these models could be very, very, very helpful. And also, if people are interested, our software is there, and people can feed in other countries' data into our software to do this type of studies.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mo.
Well, I will conclude the session with the question about Thailand, and then also bring back about the team discussion in the beginning. So you've been working in Breakthough Energy for, I think, almost 9 years. So can you share with us what kind of qualification like your team is looking at? Because it sounds really incredible, like 9 years, and then the team is still like 10 to 12-ish, which is not really sizable compared with, it's basically startup size. So we're really curious about how the team has been structured, and what kind of like qualifications and talents you're looking for, and maybe our audience, if they're interested, how they can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so our team is basically we have a research scientist, a major in like energy system, or specialized energy system modeling. We also have like a pure software engineers to help us build easy to use softwares. We also have data scientists to help us collect and analyze data. So we definitely definitely hope to find people with a background in both energy field or like power system, etc., and also some experience with programming like Python, etc. Those are very, very, very useful expertise. I think not just my team is looking for, but also a lot of the modeling team in the United States or in the world, in Europe, are looking for. But I also want to mention that so Breakthough Energy is a company with a focus working in different areas. So besides my area focusing on research, we also have an area focusing on VC, right? Like project financing and policy. So if you have background expertise in policy or in finance, I think you can also find interesting job postings from Breakthough Energy. And I think experience is also something other teams and also my teams are looking for. Yeah, and I think I will share my email contact in the end. It's also in my slides, so feel free to reach me.
Thank you so much. And then it's really incredible discussion with us, especially it's a day before the Spring Festival. So appreciate your time a lot. And then thank you so much for our co-host audience online. So this will be online soon after editing. And then we will also attach the links we just discussed. And don't forget to check out the open source website like from Breakthough Energy. And it's like if you're from academia or industry, I think there is an angle you can dive into and then find a chance to collaborate. Thanks again, Yixing. So thank you so much. And then looking forward to our next chat.
Absolutely. And a happy Chinese New Year to you and everyone.
Thank you so much for listening to today's talks at Climind. Stay tuned for more insight into how climate data solutions will be the game changer in climate change mitigation adaptation. We will invite more leading experts to come to share their top minds. Subscribe to our podcast on Loom, Spotify, or on YouTube channel. For audience in China, you can also find our shows on 小宇宙. You can also reach out to us on website or follow us on LinkedIn. Thank you so much. See you next time.